What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're bringing back the monthly power rankings for 2023. If you guys kept up with the channel last year, you would have seen that after every month I would have gone through my own power rankings, at the end of every month to see where teams sit in terms of form and all that. And as we finish the end of March and it's now round 3, we're going to have a look to see where teams sit personally. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult one. It's always more difficult at the start because you've only got a small sample size after round 3. 14 of the 18 sides have both recorded at least one win and one loss after round 3. So probably the most difficult power rankings to make I think I'll ever have to do. But we'll give it a go and we'll start things off from 18th to 1st. I think it's a little bit easier. And for mine, in 18th spot for the power rankings, even though they did record a good win against North on the weekend, we're going Hawthorn. I think Hawthorn are still the worst side in it this season, and they're going to be very uncompetitive with all their experience they've lost. It was particularly damning that game against the Bombers because I really thought they'd actually take it up to a side like the Bombers or even possibly win the game. To lose that one by 60 and then to back it up even worse off against the Swans by 80. I expected a bad performance, but not that bad. 17th for mine, I'm going to go the West Coast Eagles. You could argue that could be a little bit harsh from how they've started the season, and expectations wise they probably have exceeded expectations. I know they've only got the one win, but they played fairly decently with what they've been given. The round 1 game against North, whilst they weren't awesome, they were probably lucky to only lose that one by under a goal. They could have won it. They could have pinched that one at the end. Round 2 performance against the Giants, they were awesome, particularly in that, I think second, or they kicked like 7 goals or whatever it was. And that game, obviously, against the Dockers on the weekend, were ravaged with injuries. They probably should have lost that game by less. They only lost that game by 41 because of the fact that they had like no one on the bench. The Dockers ran over the top of them. But regardless, the Eagles obviously a bottom 2 side, and last year, no real improvements to their list yet, and I think it's going to be even more difficult now with a lot of their good players out after the game against the Dockers in the Derby. For 16th, I'm having the Giants. Now, the Giants, if they didn't perform so badly last year, they probably would be higher, but because of the fact that we're taking into account last year as well, it's not all to do with the first 3 rounds. They had a really good start to the season, obviously beating the Crows really impressively, particularly after being down by as much as 34 in the really, really difficult conditions in the heat, but then they had a really poor game against the Eagles. Yeah, they came back in the game, but they just got some cheap goals at the end. And then that game against Carlton, I actually didn't think they were too bad. They actually could have won that if it wasn't for that dissent rule. They're going to play ugly footy, as Riles Macker pointed out in his video. They're not going to be the most fun team to watch or the most skillful side to watch. But I feel like the Giants this season will be a team that will play a lot better than what we predicted, and they'll be in a lot more games and more competitive and pick up some more results. We're going the Gold Coast Suns. It's not often that you're putting the side like the Suns in 15th after round 3 after they just beat the reigning premiers, but those first 2 results were quite concerning. I really expected a lot more from them in those first 2 games. Particularly that game against Sydney, I actually tipped them for the win, and to go out in that fashion by 50 and to just put in really no effort. But finally, they actually picked it up and they played a good game of footy against the Cats, which goes to show they might be able to take it up to the better sides this year. And they just needed that, and I think that win bumps up a little bit. But we haven't seen enough yet from the Suns this season for me to be fully sold. I think they'll be alright this year, but not too much to be seen on the Suns so far. Now, for 14th for mine, you would not have expected this side to be in this position after how they started in round 1. But I'm actually going to go and put in Port Adelaide. I don't think they could have responded any worse off after their really impressive win against the Lions and what they have had. That showdown performance, that fade out was extremely concerning. The fact that they were in the game for a lot of it. They probably should have won that game given where they were, home crowd as well. They should have had the fans cheering them on, but Adelaide kicked like the last 5-6 goals of the game. They lost the game by 30 points, and the defense is a real area of concern for the Power in my opinion. And North Melbourne are in 13th for mine. It's a hard one for North because they were extremely poor last year. They finished bottom of the table, so maybe I'll have them a little bit higher than what they probably should have been. But I still think you got to give them a bit of credit for how they started the season. To go 2-0, who would have expected that to happen? Yeah, some might have expected them to beat West Coast, but no one really had them beating Fremantle, particularly away at Optus Stadium when they started poorly themselves. You would have expected some sort of response. I know that game, though, against Hawthorn, they lost against the side that I think will finish last, and that's really disappointing, and that's the thing about North Melbourne. They're going to have those games even against the poorer sides. You can't really trust them yet. Only a small sample size for North Melbourne. They're looking okay. Now, for 12th spot, I have the Fremantle Dockers. Hard one to rank. Really hard one to rank Fremantle. They could be as low as 15th or as high as 8th, I almost feel. But I think I'm going to have them in that middle spot in the 12th. They certainly needed to pick up the result against West Coast, in which they did. From expectations, they were expected to start 3-0. Be a possible top 4 side. Their skills are atrocious. Their 4 line is a joke at the moment. Why is Matty Taberner on the side? Like, so many question marks for the Dockers. I got the win against West Coast, but they're a side I have 17th in my power ranking. And I won't lie, I know they won it by 41, but it wasn't the most convincing win. They actually had to go into like 5th gear in that last quarter to run over the top of an injury-ravaged West Coast outfit. But yeah, particularly that 3rd quarter, I thought they were well off. And I think Freo, a better performance. They got the win, a bit more confidence. I'm not going to have them too low because they're still a side that I think could make the 8 this year. But for now, I'm going to have the Dockers in 12th. And a side that is very, very difficult to split, really, with their starts have been just as bad as each other. I've got the Dogs in 11th. Now, the reason why I've got the Dogs as slightly higher is due to the quality of opposition that they played against. They've obviously played Melbourne. Excusable to lose them by 50. Probably shouldn't have been a 50-point loss. It was a bit concerning. It got even more concerning when they lost by 50 against the Saints. They did get a good response against Brisbane, which is why they're in that 11th spot. They would have been a lot lower, though, if they didn't win that game. And I know it wasn't the greatest game of footy for either side. Very sloppy, but players such as Jamari Ugle-Hagan, Bontempelli lifted up for the Dogs when they needed them to. Bit of a weird one for the Dogs. They don't look like finalists at the moment, but you never know. Now, the side that I've got in 10th spot for now is Essendon. Essendon are a bit of a weird one. I know they're in the 8 right now, but they're 2-1. They had a poor season last year, which is why I can't just have them in the 8. And the teams they've played against haven't been the greatest. They beat Hawthorn, who are going to be last probably this year. They beat Gold Coast, who I've got 15th in my rankings. I think Essendon, for the most part, they'd be really happy with their start. To start 2-1, they could start 3-1 next week. I think they're doing better under Brad Scott, but they're still a side that I just don't think will make finals this year. Now, in 9th spot, who would have predicted that this side would be finishing 9th in my power rankings after round 3? But I think, if anything, this 9th position flatters the Cats. The only reason why I've got them in 9th is because they were the reigning premiers. But it's not often you've got the side that won 16 games in a row in the previous season, 9th in the power rankings after round 3. There are so many areas of concern now for the Cats after round 3. You gave them the excuse against the Pies in that round 1 clash. I actually didn't think they were too bad. They just, ran out of legs in that last one. That second game against Carlton, a little bit more concerning, particularly in the midfield, but you give them the benefit of the doubt. They only lost it by 8. But to lose the game against the Suns, who are also 0-2, and to lose it in that way when it should have been by more. Yeah, real levels of concern. So many players that were stars for them last year have been a shell of their former selves. Stengel, Hawkins, Dangerfield. There are Cats who have a very good chance of not making the finals this year. And if it wasn't for the fact that they finished minor premiers last year, the fact that they've started 0-3, I'd probably have him in my bottom 4 in my power ranking. Alrighty, let's now hit into my top 8. And this could be a little bit controversial. I don't know if too many people would agree with me with this one. But I've actually slid in the Crows in my spots in the power rankings. They would have had to have risen like 7 rankings considering they started 0-2. But that game against Port Adelaide in the showdown, tell you what, they're going to be a very decent side this year, the Crows. I think there's certainly a chance for the finals if they play like that. Particularly that last quarter where they just ran over the top of Port Adelaide, just piling on those goals. Their foreline's going to be really dangerous. Thilthorpe, Fogarty, Rankin. I know they lost the first 2 games, particularly that Giants game was probably the most concerning. But again, with the Crows, if it wasn't for bad goal kicking, they would have won that game. They looked really good in the first half. Maybe the heat was a bit of an issue why they let the Giants back in that game. The Richmond game, how good were they in that 3rd quarter? I think they had more scoring shots than the Tigers. So maybe the Crows are a little bit too high for mine, but I'm just, really liking the look of what the Crows have been doing. And I think they can really use that win against the Power in that showdown to kickstart their season with a few more wins. For 7th for mine, I've got the Brisbane Lions. The Lions have certainly underperformed to start things off this season. Really poor outing against the Power, losing that one by 50. Had a really good response against Melbourne. They probably should have won that game by more if it wasn't for the power outage. And I thought, maybe they're back to their best. But I expected them to do a lot better against the Dogs. I know the Dogs, they got that response that we were expecting. But the Lions still probably should have won that. Because I don't think the Dogs were anywhere near their best. And I tell you what, if the Lions want to be a chance of the flag this season, we've got to see a lot more improvement out of them. Because they've so far started the season pretty poorly. And they could go 1-3 against the Pies next week. 6th spot for my power rankings, we have gone for the Tigers. Now, the Tigers are a bit of a weird one. They've been sort of meh. Like, they haven't been terrible, but they haven't been amazing, I won't lie. They had that draw against Carlton, which I didn't really know what to think of that. I thought they were probably the better side, and they don't look great. Their skills so far after round 3 have been really poor. Tim Taranto, the worst kick in the comp, I think I've read, and only 40 inside 50s they registered against Collingwood. Bit of an area of concern, but they're going to get their players back, so I think it's going to be a slow start for the Tigers. I think there's still a chance at the top 4 this year. Don't get too worried on Richmond so far. They tend to start seasons off pretty slowly and then build into things. I think for 6th for mine is fair. Now in 5th, I could have had this side of my 4, but I've decided to just wait a little bit. I've decided to just wait. I know it's 3 weeks. It's my side, the Saints. Now, a lot of people probably thought, oh, you got to have them in the forward, right? They started 3-0, and yeah, they did start 3-0. Based off expectation, they really couldn't have exceeded any higher so far to start the season off, but we're waiting it out for a few reasons. One of the reasons, the quality of opposition. Whilst they did make finals last year, the Dogs and the Dockers, we haven't really had any major tests yet so far, so we don't really know yet where the Saints are at. Whilst they've been really impressive, I've got them in 5th for now, but a lot of things to be excited for the Saints under Ross Lyon. I've got Carlton in 4th. Now, the Blues, whilst they certainly haven't been at their best, the fact that they've been picking up these results goes to show that they're going to be a side that probably will make finals this year and probably could go deep. Harry Mackay, for an example, he's barely done anything so far this season, and they're still getting wins without him. And I think it's also important for Carlton to be picking up these relatively close wins, because all their games have been pretty close. They tend to drop them. They did last year, but they've been getting points for it. Haven't been amazing, but I think Carlton, you know, should have made the finals last year. I expect them to finish probably top 5 this season, so yeah, the fact that they're still undefeated, they're top 3. I think they're 3rd on the ladder now. They're 4th in my power ranking. Now, in 3rd, I've got the Sydney Swans, and it's a bit of a difficult one for the Swans because they had that poor game against the D's, but I think it's going to be a blimp on the radar. I don't think I'm too concerned over the Swans over that game because I thought they were certainly probably better than what the margin suggested. Their first 2 games, they were just so convincing. I won't lie. I know they were against the bottom ranked sides, but they just dominated against Gold Coast and the Hawks. And to be honest with you, they made the grand final last year. They don't look like they're going to drop off too much from last year's performance in the grand final. I think they're going to be a pretty decent side. And second, I've got Melbourne. They just knocked off a side in the Swans that I had 3rd by 50 points to the G, and obviously a 50-point win against the Dogs in round 1. You know, and they probably would be 1st if it wasn't for that game against Brisbane. It was a pretty disappointing outing. Only very lucky that it was an 11-point game, because for a lot of it, they were smashed around the ball. But I think for Melbourne, they've been a really good side the last 2 years. They're going to be up and amongst it again this season, and they've started the season off really well. Very impressive. I'm having them sitting in 2nd, which obviously leaves one more spot, and for mine, I've got to go the Pies. I think you can't have the Pies in any position other than 1st. They've been the best side in the competition so far in the first 3 weeks. That game against Geelong, the game against Port Adelaide, the game against Richmond. I know Richmond game, they didn't win by as much, but it should have been a 7-goal win, to be honest, with the way they played. They were just all over the Tigers. Very inaccurate, but yeah, I think Collingwood, yeah, they're just doing everything right. All their players, all their good players are playing really well, having brilliant starts to their season. Let's just hope, if anything, that the Pies aren't peaking right now, because you don't want to be peaking in round 3, but I think the Pies are going to be, yeah, up there with I think they'll make the grand final, to be honest, from what we've seen so far this season, with the Pies have been awesome. Alrighty, well, those are my early power rankings after round 3 for 2023. If you guys want to let me know what you reckon in the comments below, if you disagree or agree, or what your power rankings are, let me know down below in the comments. So yeah, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and let's give this video a like. Let's get this video to 500 likes. I think we can get that going, and yeah, I'll see you soon in my next one.